Thank you, Xakia. And hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. My name is Jodie Baker, and I am the founder and group CEO at Xakia Technologies, which is a matter management system for in-house legal teams. I am delighted to be joined today by three fabulous women who each take a different role in the legal industry being legal technology, legal operations, and just general legal innovation. So I'm going to, rather than try to introduce each of them, make sure that you hear all of their fabulous backgrounds, starting, of course, with the lovely Naomi. Naomi Hickey-Humble, would you mind just giving a brief overview of your background?
Yes, thank you, Jodie. It's great to be here. I'm the head of legal operations at Ellison. I lead the legal ops portfolio that supports our teams and clients in the disputes, insurance, competition, risk consulting, and climate risk practices. I'm also part of Ellison's broader legal optimization consulting group. So this is a group of over 65 in-house technology, process, legal ops, and automation specialists. And we support in-house legal teams across 6 best practice domains, ranging from strategic planning through to empowering teams for high-performance culture, enhancing resources, data, and importantly, leveraging technology for the greatest success. So it's great to be here.
Fantastic perspective to have from one of the leading law firms in Australia, and also across so many clients. So thank you so much. Angela, Yuen, fabulous to have you here, obviously bringing a completely different perspective, but probably related. Would you mind just giving a background to your role in the industry today and where you've come from?
Sure. Thank you, Jodie. Thank you for the invitation to join this panel. I'm the Deputy General Counsel and the General Manager of Legal Operations at JERA. I'm based in Tokyo. We have a very small team. Legal ops is only a team of 4. Our legal team is approximately 30. But the JERA is a relatively young energy company, and we're formed by 2 major Japanese utilities, and we produce about 30% of the electricity in Japan. But our business covers the entire energy value chain, and we have assets in operation across the globe. So, for example, we procure fuel from 16 different countries, operate a fleet of 19 LNG carriers, and we have about 30 power generation assets spread across 10 different countries. So I just wanted to give an idea of sort of the size of the organization and relative size of our legal team.
Fantastic. It's going to be great to hear the client perspective, Angela. And of course, the lovely Laura Keily, who has her own legal technology company, and excited to bring that perspective to the table too, Laura.
Thank you, Jodie. Lovely to see you all today. I am a barrister and former M&A lawyer, actually, and the founder and CEO of Immediation. Immediation is an online dispute resolution platform which optimises hearings and mediation and case management for all parts of the dispute resolution ecosystem. So everything from helping courts to produce more throughput, to also helping optimise arbitration and mediation for dispute resolution centres, as well as supporting litigators to make better decisions as they conduct cases. And so our technology is now in operation across the globe. We have a team of about 50 people in the United States and Australia and New Zealand and London. And so I guess fairly rapid growth as a result of the pandemic's tailwind that we had. But now focusing exclusively on being the CEO of Immediation and no longer practicing for the time being.
That's very exciting to have both that background and, of course, your journey as a legal tech entrepreneur, Laura. So thank you for joining us today. And really, just a congratulations to you all on your journeys. And I'm very excited to bring such diverse perspectives to this conversation today. We have about 6 questions that we would like to talk about in our panel today. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to respond to these questions and see if we can get a really interesting conversation to our audience today. I'm going to kick off with one that I think is relevant right across the legal industry, but indeed across the whole corporate universe, if you like, and that is productivity. It's such an important driver of economic growth in the next era. I'm interested to hear your perspectives around why productivity improvement is so important to the legal industry right now at this point. So maybe I'll kick off with you first, Naomi. What's your view on the productivity challenge for the legal industry today?
Yeah, thanks, Jodie. Look, I guess productivity has always been important, but as you've identified, I think in recent years and particularly since the pandemic, the pace of change is just relentless. And I guess quite simply, the legal industry has to keep up and has to optimize productivity to stay abreast with our peers and the rest of the business world, and but also to stay abreast with the businesses in which the legal functions operate and support, and the expectations of clients. So, we know the legal functions are expected to do more, to do it with greater efficiency, to do it with less money and resources, and to be across increasingly more complex and nuanced issues and a more layered regulatory landscape. So it is an imperative for the legal industry to focus on productivity, and that is, reducing waste in our processes, identifying what's low value, what could be self-serviced, what requires a heavier touch, unlocking time to be more efficient and effective and impactful. And really the best way to think of it, I think it's about harvesting efficiency and then using that time created to invest in capabilities and technology solutions, if that may be the case, to help deliver more impact back. So it's a challenge, but it's something, as you say, that it's imperative for the legal industry. I think now and moving forward, it won't change.
Yeah, the challenge is certainly now. There are many hurdles that we're facing in the world right now. Laura, I'm interested in your perspective, coming from a productivity tool itself, something that you've actually put into the market to help lawyers and the legal industry be more productive. So interested in your perspective around this.
It's interesting because as we build our litigation and arbitration suite to optimize the conduct of proceedings, we're really focused on what we can do to stop lawyers focusing on all the administration of a case and actually focus on getting a better outcome, supported by data and analytics and insights as well. But when we were thinking about this yesterday, we were realizing that in fact it has a positive impact, not just on the bottom line of the firm, but also on its employees. We're facing this sort of great exodus across the profession and the difficulty in retaining people who have an expectation now of being able to work from home and flexibly, possibly for the first time in history. So if we can use tools that make our lawyers feel like they are doing high value, very strategic work, rather than traditionally as senior associates or juniors doing a whole lot of case administration, I think that will not only improve their experience and their ability to deliver to the clients, but also to themselves, and probably make them more loyal and wedded to the firm, and hopefully get back to some of that career longevity that we used to see in law firms, which seems to have evaporated in recent times, which I personally think is not a great thing for anybody.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Angela, one of the things that Naomi mentioned was around the question of increasing the output and the ever-changing regulatory landscape. I don't think I can name another industry that is going through such a huge transition as the energy industry right now, from a regulatory perspective and also just in terms of course, the business itself. So interested in your thoughts around why productivity is important generally, but also specifically in your industry.
Yeah, actually, I really want to pick up on what Laura was saying about productivity and sort of the benefits for the lawyers, the rewards, because really I actually view productivity through a sustainability and ESG lens. And that higher productivity can really translate to, more time in training and development, reinvesting, I think Naomi also mentioned, which can lead to career progression, financial rewards, greater career satisfaction, much better work-life balance. And this, attracts talent and also helps us retain talent. And all of this makes for a much more desirable workplace and ultimately a more sustainable corporate legal practice. And that's, I think, is the most important thing to us.
Interesting.
And to what extent do you think that productivity, so if we go to the core of productivity, while sustainability is really important and our own personal sustainability is really important, there's also a component of this that is being able to do more work for the same number of resources that we have available. We have a finite number of hours in the day, but presumably there are also going to be economic challenges to most of the legal industry over the next 12, 24 months. And so there will be a pressure to do more work, output more for the same budget or even less. And so productivity improvements become a critical component of that. I would have thought that in the energy industry, that's probably to some extent with a really, really heavy regulatory load, that's a pretty big lift. Is that something that you're seeing in your organisation?
Well, definitely. I think productivity is always critical, because whether you're in-house or in or private practice, you always have to juggle that balancing act between budget and workload. And with the really dynamic environment in which we are operating at the moment, with constant changes, heavy regulations, sanctions, ESG issues that we need to keep abreast of, we have to, having that productivity allows us not only to sort of keep pace with the business, but to actually stay ahead with the relevant legal and regulatory issues, as you mentioned, and that impact the business. And that's when we can become, a valued advisor to the business. So a trusted legal advisor, which is, what our mission vision is for the legal team.
Absolutely. Well, you've got the floor, Angela. I might then follow on with the next question. The must-have tech stack for every lawyer in 2022. There's so much going on in the legal technology space. What are the must-haves for you and your team?
I think that's a really interesting question, Jodie, but actually I don't think there is a must-have for us or even for any lawyer, because for us, the way I see it, legal tech is a means to an end. The most important thing is really to understand, first of all, the needs and requirements of the team. And this is going to be different for in-house versus private practice, and also depends on the size of the organization, the reach of the organization, the areas of practice, and your industry and sector, and the social, environmental, and political events that are really impacting on your company. As you just mentioned, for JERA, our business, because it spans the upstream assets as well as fuel transportation and trading and procurement, the war in Ukraine and the economic sanctions has really, and the growing emphasis on ESG as well, and human rights in the supply chain and anti-bribery and corruption, all these are really impacting on how we conduct our business, how we advise our business, what we need to know to advise our business. So for us, there is a really increasing need for a technology that can help us produce something like a heat map that will allow us to really visualize reliable data and stay ahead and help de-risk the business. So what it comes down to, I think, is looking at your team's needs and value proposition, then applying that business context and strategic objectives. And that will help you crystallize your priorities. And that is the diligence that you really need to do before you go swiping the corporate credit card at, the Legaltech toy store. So I don't think there is a must-have. I think you really need to do that diligence.
Do that first. Well, in that Legaltech toy store, Naomi, what do you see? Is there a must-have tech stack when you're advising your clients?
Yeah, I think depends to a certain extent on what you have already within your environment, whether perhaps you're an in-house lawyer, whether you're in a law firm, whatever it might look like. But I think we all use Office 365, and I think fluency in that as a suite is really critical. Understanding even the capabilities within it. Power Automate, Power BI. There's a lot you can leverage out of that O365 suite. Basic task management, being able to understand sort of decision logic and how to create potential like forms for intake. I think that as a baseline is really important. I think then there's not one particular tech beyond that. It really just depends on the business that you're in and what your core work is. But matter management solutions are really important. Knowledge management solutions are really important. And then though, just going back to what's been discussed, and I completely agree, it's the simplest is the best. And sometimes it is, well, a lot of the time it is just understanding what foundational requirements or how to create the best environment for success for your technology. And that is going back to cultural change, people, process. But they're just some of, I'd say the core that we would be expecting what we're seeing when we speak with our clients around what lawyers really need in their toolkit.
Interesting. Laura, what's your perspective around the legal tech stack? I'm not hearing any must-haves yet, so I'm interested.
Oh well, mediation is obviously a must-have. Well, not really, yeah. But I guess I make a couple of points. One is that I think we are starting to see a shift from the generic to the specific, and an understanding among the more sophisticated law firms that maybe what was acceptable during a pandemic sort of crisis scenario of we'll just grab whatever we can to get by is no longer going to be acceptable in the new realm of digital is first. And so we're seeing a lot of interest in the fact that there are now specific legal technology tools built to minimize risk for law firms in relation to their clients, and also to optimize performance for general counsel to be able to save money. So I actually don't think that law firms are going to be able to get away with saying, well, we'll suck it and see if they want to compete. So in the United States, we're seeing the law firms talking to us very hungry to understand how they can improve, but not only that, how they can leverage data and insights that we can provide to them to get better outcomes, but also go and get more work. And so we're starting to provide to them insights which will enable them to target specific clients, to foresee specific cases in patents or class actions come to the fore. And so, again, I guess the United States is a very dynamic, progressive market, but we're starting to see a real driver towards purpose-built technologies in that market. And I think it will eventually flow down to Australasia and some of the other follower countries that get there. So I don't know from a general counsel's perspective what the tech stack is. I would imagine that obviously the new age, Jodie, your solution, those kind of solutions which help optimize general counsel to keep external legal spend down will continue to be on the rise as the pressure builds, and the salary pressure to keep lawyers is actually going to turn into pressure to bill more, because you can't actually pay lawyers more unless you charge the client more. So ultimately that bubble might burst again, and general counsel may start more downward pressure on rates like they did in the last financial crisis that we had and the one before that as well.
Certainly, I think that there is, amongst our client base, we see a very big push for controlling costs, but also being able to show the value of the legal team. And a big part of that, of course, is the data analytics that you've all mentioned. Data analytics really sits at the core of all of these things. And whilst the Microsoft stack is obviously one way of extracting that, it often requires people who are quite expert in some of those tools. So finding a legal data analytics solution that makes that a little more accessible is important. Probably leads nicely into our next question, which is actually all about legal data analytics. We certainly see a really big push around the legal data analytics for in-house. Obviously, Angela, you're from in-house. Naomi, you're advising in-house, and Laura has just mentioned in-house here. Maybe we'll just circle back again, Angela, the use of legal data analytics in your team, how you use that, what's all the fuss about, what output do you get from that, irrespective of how you get there, what is the use of legal data analytics for you and your team? You mentioned a heat map. Would you be able to expand on that and or any other legal data analytics that you use and the benefits of that?
Sure. Thanks, Jodie. Look, topic close to my heart, data. Data is the new oil, and it's, hard to refute the statement that, the world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but data. It's just in the media so much, but also it's a journey that we've recently embarked on in the last year or so. You mentioned already, Jodie, that there is an increasing demand on in-house team to contribute to that enterprise value. And we're shifting from a cost center and a transactional team to really being a business partner. And there's more pressure on this because in our experience, JERA has grown in the last 5 years from a company of 500 to 5,000 in headcount. So to be able to handle this growth in demand and really deliver more value whilst keeping the lights on, no pun intended, data analytics are absolutely essential. And that's our experience. And why do I say this? It is because in our experience, data on intake and workflow has really equipped us to make informed decisions about resourcing, about training and development and group planning. And we can report now on response time, on turnaround time, on the volume of transactions, and very, very importantly, the value, the risk, and the strategic impact of the matters that legal is advising on. And there are two very, very clear benefits of being able to do this. Firstly, we can take those low value, low impact work off the table of our legal team, and we can automate, use AI, machine learning, provide self-help solutions for the business. This frees up, our team, and they can then contribute to the strategically important matters, and that makes us the trusted advisor in line with our mission statement. But secondly, and absolutely critical and important, is that we're able to draw on this data and demonstrate the value that legal is adding to the business in our reports to senior management. Because, as lawyers, we're really good with words, and we can articulate that value that legal brings, but it is really very powerful if we can back it up with data, hard data, and to help the senior management to visualize that value with graphs and charts. Because, that's what they're used to seeing. It's not words. They want to see numbers and hard data, and I think that's absolutely invaluable, and what makes data the new oil in in-house corporate legal departments.
That's fantastic. It's a new language in some ways. Naomi, to you.
The new normal, Jodie.
I think Angela summed that up beautifully, and I don't really know what I'd add other than, I think, as we all know, you can't improve what you don't know, and in order to know, you need to measure. And so data is just so critical to that. We're in the business of risk management and increasingly preemptive risk management, and that is driven by the effective use, the effective capturing and the effective then use of data. As you touched on, Angela, there's some incredibly rich insights that we can get from good, clean data management practices that can be drawn out to inform more strategic decision making and decision planning, and to be that key strategic partner to the business. Having full oversight of your matters, being able to track suppliers, the diversity of your suppliers, the real-time reporting, resourcing, as you said, and really legal in-house legal teams that have an opportunity to be sort of forging the path and being leader in the increasing ESG and D&I space through good data capture. Again, Angela, you mentioned this, but having data infrastructure that is connected across the business delivers those business insights, and you can then really clearly measure the value that you're bringing back to the business. And, we do this a lot in our legal optimization consultancy practice. We help teams gather data and baseline. It might be through tailored diagnostic surveys and data review methodologies to understand the current state of play, and from there we can help work on assessing and prioritizing what needs to be focused upon. As you said, what could be self-service, what could be automated, what's perhaps a hybrid, and then what foundations do we need to get in place to have the greatest success for setting up that tech to get that impact that we want. The one thing I would touch on is that it's really important to have a rigorous process around collecting the data, ensuring that it's the right data and that it's usable, because you can also then find you're in a bit of a mess with all of this data and you don't know what to do with it, and you're not quite sure what it's meant to be achieving. So it's the new, I love that you said it's the new oil. I would agree with that completely.
Yeah.
The energy,
the structure of that in place at the start. Oh, sorry, Jodie, I was just saying that we're working with data scientists within Immediation, and they've sort of educated me on the importance of the data strategy from the get-go of the build of the technology. Yeah. So it's and they sort of explained to me that if you don't get that right, you build yourself into a corner where it's too late because you've either got the wrong stuff, or it's not clean, or it's totally unhelpful, and then you've built the technology stack incorrectly, and then you have to see either rip and replace or retrofit, and it's a bit of a disaster. So the change management piece together with the data architecture at the outset of an implementation is absolutely critical. So I think we're all on the right track here.
The other thing that I think is really important is that it is a new language for lawyers. It's a completely new space. And so education, I think there's a whole webinar around data and data analytics in the legal industry in and of itself. But it is a fascinating space and extremely powerful. I think you used that word 4 or 5 times, Angela, when you were speaking, just the power of data in terms of how it can communicate an idea that we as lawyers are so used to describing in beautiful words, but actually a picture tells 1,000 words. And so empowering lawyers to be able to use that data effectively is certainly something that we need to work on as an industry, and it sits hand in glove with legal technology, which is, of course, what this audience is most interested in. We might just move on to the next question. And Laura, this is 100% in your space. What role does government and the court system play in encouraging tech adoption? This is, Immediation's playground, really.
It is. Lucky me. So I often, when I'm talking to investors, I often say, if you think about the legal industry as laggards and you've got the forward-facing corporate advisory teams and in-house at sort of the most progressive end of legal technology adoption, and then you've got the litigators at the other end, historically still wearing their wigs and gowns and carrying their pink ribbon tied briefs, as I was when I started this company. And then you've got the courts to the right-hand side of that. You can't get a more conservative historically focused group than judges. However, I'm pleased to say that they are starting to shift to understand that the community and the law firms that are part of the profession are demanding and expecting digitisation. And so we are now starting to see both dispute resolution centres and sort of quasi-government organisations, as well as central government agencies and courts lead transformation, which I think is flowing back up the food chain to the litigators. It's a bit of an interesting dynamic because often the courts will say, well, the litigators want to choose which platform to use. And the litigators say, well, the courts want to choose what platform to use. So nobody's quite sure who's leading the dance. But it is becoming clearer in our market observation over the past really 12 months that the court and government agencies are now saying, okay, enough's enough. This is up to us. It's simply not good enough to do what we've done in the past. And now we have a massive backlog. We had a backlog before, but now we have an even greater backlog. And so we need to do something about this. And they're starting to grapple with that and talk to us about how on earth they grapple with that. So it's pleasing to see them start to lead the way.
Well, that's pretty exciting news, to be honest. It shows that there's a real shift there, a structural shift, and I think that's what's required in terms of shifting not just the litigation space, but just a general structural shift in terms of the laggards, as you call them. So if we can actually move the industry, then absolutely. Angela, what are you seeing on your side of things? Obviously, you've got a highly regulated industry, government and court systems playing a role.
Well, yeah, I can't speak to the court system, and because Japan is really at the infancy of any legal tech, it's a very, very small industry, and it's sort of only become a buzzword in the last 12 months or so, 12 to 18 months. But what I have noticed and is extremely encouraging is that in Japan, METI, which is our Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, has formed a study group, and they have defined the best practices for management and legal functions on how they can contribute to fortifying the international competitiveness of Japanese companies. And this study group published 2019 in November, which talks about and highlights the importance and the rising prominence of legal tech, a potential to enhance and improve efficiency in legal functions, in-house legal functions. They also produce a detailed skills map, which sets out the sort of skills required as a best practice, of legal functions ranging from entry level to management level in a legal team. And it also mentions the use of AI and IT, the ability to use AI and IT as a skill required for anyone from a managerial level and above. And anything METI publishes becomes, a benchmark. So I think it's a really great first step, but it was quite a long report, and there was only brief mentions of Legaltech. And so I don't think that the Japanese government is doing enough. It needs to set clear policy guidelines as the next step. It needs to provide subsidies and grants to fund legal innovation and development of legal tech in Japan, because it's actually quite hard, as you know, Jodie, in your experience, for Japan to simply go abroad and look for legal tech because of the language barrier. We need legal tech that provides multilingual functions. So to encourage sort of that organic growth in Japan, I think the government has to start really driving that and getting behind the industry.
Baby steps, I guess, but let's call them green shoots, shall we? So that's not bad. Naomi, what are you seeing on your side in terms of the court and government support for legal tech adoption?
Yes, I think the courts, as Laura said, they can be slow. I mean, they can be slow, but there is, I think, an important opportunity for them to lead by example. We obviously moved to e-hearings and paperless files and e-briefs and things during the pandemic, and seeing that still being retained to a certain degree, particularly around interlocutory proceedings and things like that, and that's good. I think that's great. But I think, our court systems can do more, and I think they have a really important role to play in that broader access to justice piece. Everyday people who need to access the courts and have usable interface solutions and access information, and I think that's an opportunity area for the court system and the government and regulation, etc., to support and play a part in. I think it can be complex. Government agencies are big beasts, and there's lots of historical and legacy sort of systems and things that have to be navigated through. So it's not easy, but I think there's green shoots, as you say. There's opportunities.
Green shoots. We do require leadership, though, and so we're three of us based here in Australia, and obviously Angela in Japan. It's interesting to see some other moves across other jurisdictions. Obviously, Singapore's been fairly active in this space. New Zealand also making some moves. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. It'll be great to ask the same question again next year and see if we've got a little bit more than green shoots. Maybe we'll just, while you've got the floor, Naomi, I'm going to start with you on this next question. Throughout the pandemic, and even Laura mentioned the tailwinds that we've had post-pandemic, there's been an increased interest in legal tech and legal tech adoption, but innovation around the core business model of the legal industry, and by which we mean law firms, is also something that we need to be having a close look at, because legal technology and legal innovation sit very closely together. Do you think that the legal industry and the core business model innovation is keeping up with the progress in the legal tech innovation space?
I think there's some work to do. I think there's a real case for change in regards to innovating the core business models. As Laura said, we're a conservative bunch, and we are still playing catch up. If you look at other industries, they're entirely disrupted by the pandemic, and we're seeing in the new normal things aren't reverting back to pre-pandemic ways, and that reflects so many things, like broader sort of socio-economic aspects. It's consumer behaviour and how expectation changes around how people locate information, seek out options, spend their money, and come back for more. And law is a service industry, and we need to adapt and, I think, rethink some of those core business legacy models. So I think where we can innovate and do better is less focus on the billable hour, more focus on defining value and work and charging accordingly. I think increased collaboration, like meaningful, real collaboration, sort of breaking down some of these barriers. We're seeing it happen with, say, one NDA is a great example, but that's like real collective efforts to streamline at a collective level that will solve complex problems. And I think in this very complex world that we live in, that's what we need to do. We're seeing the greater adoption of agile methodologies. So that's sort of a different way of working, borrowing from our tech friends. And so that also allows the legal function to operate and work in a way that mirrors that of the business. And as Angela will know, I mean, in-house legal functions, there's this strong shift and trend towards being able to provide industry insights and being empowered to move with the pace of change at an enterprise level with data and tech, as we've talked about, and to be more internally connected. And so in order to do that, we have to change our traditional way of working. And I think as well, innovation, it's such a broad term, but I think that also should apply to what Laura mentioned earlier around people experience. So how we, like traditional patterns of reward and recognition and career progression, even within traditional law firms, for example, all of that I think needs to be looked at, and there's so many opportunities for it. And we see it happening, but I think as a collective, there's more to be done.
Here's a controversial question for you, Naomi, before we pass over to Laura for her comment. So to what extent is that innovation likely to come from the incumbents in the ecosystem or new players, do you think? Because there are plenty of both, and there's been a lot of speculation for years around whether the incumbents will be able to move the Titanic in order to avoid the iceberg, but there doesn't. We talk a lot about the fact that there needs to be innovation, but the shift in that core business model seems to be quite slow in coming.
Yeah, I think the incumbents, they are playing a part that is important. Obviously, the new players are pushing the envelope and forcing change and forcing the incumbents to step up their game. And I think the incumbents, we've got an important role to play, and there is a shift. There are innovation functions being built within, these large law firm beasts. Ellison is one. We have a wonderful innovation function. I can talk to, KWM recently won the Financial Times Innovation Award. I know I'm talking about a competitor, but it was wonderful to see them win that. And I think, as I say, in terms of the collective, that's great to see that as a leading example. They beat out a huge range of wonderful competitors with their solution. So I think it will come from all players in the ecosystem, and I think that's the exciting part, because everyone can bring something different to the table.
Brilliant. Laura, what are you seeing? You're across a whole bunch of different law firms and working with all different parts of the ecosystem. Where are you seeing that innovation and the shift in the core business model?
I'm not entirely sure that the incumbents feel the need to change, because they're doing really well. At the moment, particularly in the United States, I think the need for innovation is only to win. Okay, so it's incredibly competitive, but still very profitable. I don't think I'm seeing a huge push towards we've got to do value-added billing or we've got to do fixed billing. We just don't hear that. The billable hour, I think, is still around. And so we're sort of talking about the need for innovation almost in a vacuum, separated from reality. So my view, Jodie, is it's not keeping up with the legal tech tools that are there. I'm not sure what you think about the fact that about 5 or 10 years ago, there seemed to be this sort of influx of new law, and those models, those breaking down models, are still there. But I don't know if they've quite had the same push through, perhaps, that was intended or foreseen at the time, for example, of Hive and other new law operations that came on board very innovatively. Whether that's sort of made its way through the market, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think so necessarily.
It'll be interesting to see what the shift is over. It's always easier to see what innovation might look like in 20 years than what it might look like in 2 years, because things move relatively slowly. But certainly those models are still there, and many of them are very successful. And as Naomi has rightly pointed out, it does push the incumbents to do new things too. But you're absolutely right. The revenue of some of those models merely reflects the increase in the revenue from some of our incumbents. So there's still a long way to go. Maybe we'll just wrap up with a question that is really one of the key drivers of legal technology, and that is the investment trend. We've seen an explosion in investment in legal tech, and that's really important for driving new innovations, driving adoption, driving growth. Investment is a complicated beast. Whilst nobody likes to be sold to, nobody likes to hear from a salesperson. The reality is that the salesperson, the legal technology, selling the legal technology are also drivers of big innovation and big adoption. And so really getting good investment into this market is such a critical component of seeing its growth. But, it's a complicated beast. And Laura, you're right at the forefront of that. So keen to hear your thoughts around what that looks like in your space.
I think again, it's being driven by the United States. There's specific legal tech investment funds in the US that just don't exist here. I'm seeing a segmentation, I guess, in our space. I'm very focused on our space, but a particular interest hiving off into court tech, justice tech, and different parts, even, I guess, of matter management that used to be maybe sort of lobbed together are starting to split out. And you're seeing funds contact us who have very specific interests in aspects of the legal tech community. You're also seeing large legal tech, what are basically private equity firms, sort of hoovering up end-to-end ecosystems and trying to plug the technology gap so that they're trying to own the market. That seems to be a trend which I think will be ongoing. And then we might end up with, 2 or 3 or 4 big sort of Google and Facebook type legal tech firms. I don't see the level of money going down. I mean, I know it's hard to raise in this market. You certainly have to prove your business case, but the amount of money in Wall Street that is still looking for innovation and places to put it, I think is not going to slow down anytime soon. I'm not sure that we're going to see much more sort of coming out of the Australian, New Zealand sort of investment markets at the moment. Better to look, I think, offshore to Asia and the United States.
Yeah, really interesting. And the role of that investment is also important. Another place where we see investment, of course, is just in the straight up adoption and purchase of legal technology from the client. So whether it be the in-house teams or the law firms. Angela, coming from a client perspective, what does investment or the importance of investment, both in terms of the investment in legal technology that Laura's referred to, so the investors who are backing these legal technologies, and the investment as a client, what does that look like for you?
Well, let me offer, I guess, a perspective from a mid-size in-house team. And as I mentioned, we've only got a team of about 30. And I think this will probably be very different from, say, a huge organization like Google or Amazon, which has hundreds of lawyers spread across the organization. And also from the perspective that we are an energy company and we have, although international operations, a very small legal team. What I have seen at Block this year, there seems to be huge investments in CLMs and the focus on the tech and capabilities are, really quite dazzling and disorientating even. But for us, for a team of our size, it's all about most bang for buck. And, there is a very limited pot of gold. So what is important is alignment of the tech with our value proposition, which I've mentioned before. And then, a little bit more broadly, the strategic vision of the enterprise. So what this means for us is really just, again, focusing on defining the end state, taking a look at where we are at the moment, and then how do we get from here to there. And once we have an understanding of that, the challenges that we face, we need to organize them into, effort and impact. And when we know that, then we can see what would give us the most bang for buck, what would, have the biggest impact on increasing the value that legal brings to, the business and the enterprise. So our investment from a client perspective is driven by problems and opportunities, and innovation in tech is, rather than, the sort of capabilities that the tech brings. So it's coming, I think that's letting the cart lead the horse if we look at the tech capabilities rather than looking inwards first. But what I also want to maybe mention slightly off point is that it's not always about big investments. Innovation doesn't always have to come with a big price tag. It can just be a very small cost. And so we're always looking at very quick wins. And as Naomi mentioned before, looking at just what we already have and building on that and repurposing it before, going out shopping at that toy store.
That legal tech toy store, one of the things that occurs to me too, Angela, in your market is that going back to that question about what role does government play in the legal tech adoption, you've got a big market there in Japan, and getting some PE firms, VC firms, government incentives, whatever that might be, as investors in potential legal tech companies would be a really important role for those companies to play in legal tech adoption amongst the Japanese ecosystem. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out over the next little while too. And Naomi, just to close us off on the questions before we go to a wrap up, what are your thoughts on the investment in legal tech across the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Angela and Laura have said. I think that it's such a saturated market, and that in terms of new players and things, I feel like there's not much room for new players. But in terms of how we consult and advise our clients, it's the same. It's exactly what Angela said. It's about impact and purpose and feasibility and strategic aims, and that's the core and the baseline and the foundational work we do to then advise on, well, what then is the investment you want to make and for what purpose, and what are the quick wins that we can help get some ticks on the board before you go down that path. Because investment it's a big, it's not simple or quick or easy, and you're working with a new vendor potentially, and you need to establish a good relationship with them and understand that they're going to meet your mutual aim. So we can help as well with that sort of piece around vendor management. I would just say as well that like in terms of what we see by way of trends, when we work with our clients, it is around things like chatbot solutions or matter management solutions or document review capability solutions, contract management solutions as well. So there's the whole gamut, but it is really stripping it back down and taking that sort of foundational look at, well, what are your core aims? What are the strategic purpose of the investment you want to make? And then the feasibility part of it as well is really important, because sometimes you might, Laura mentioned earlier, there's sort of this shift from generic to specific sort of point solutions, but how might that fit in with the ecosystem of your enterprise technology, and how does that all plug in and fit? So that's, there's many pieces to the puzzle.
There sure are, and those big mop-up strategies that Laura mentioned as part of the investment trend are going to be very interesting to see how all of that plays out to make the individual investments of clients match the investment of the funders of the whole trend. Thank you very much, everybody, for your thought. I'm interested in what you wrap up. What was the most impactful point you heard today? And perhaps I'll lead here and just say that the thing for me is that all of you talked several times about data, and data being such an incredibly important of the wave, the trend, the adoption, informed that need to be made, but making sure that it sits right at the core of the whole journey that we're going on. So certainly reinforced many times that data is the central component. Perhaps we'll just start with you, Laura. What was your most impactful comment, the most impactful comment that you heard today?
I was going to say the same thing, actually, and I was going to say in response to the comment that was made about law as a service industry, I think all law firms are going to become technology firms and data firms, and that's going to be the only way to service the clients on the horizon that they understand and that they're working with. And so the more we can get our heads around that, I think the earlier the better, and particularly for the Asia Pacific and Australasian region, if we can start to be ahead of the curve on that, that would be epic.
Yes, fabulous. Angela?
Yeah, I want to follow up on that. Thank you. Because I'm a little bit shocked. Data is absolutely critically important. And I love what Laura said, because I'm shocked to hear that law firms are still running on the traditional models, because as a client, my expectation is that law firms provide and understand technology and how to deliver their services more efficiently and effectively. And, the alternative legal services, I want to see them become mainstream. It's no longer new law, it's just law. And when we work with a lot of international law firms, and certainly at the beauty parades, I always ask about their legal tech stack and what do they do around innovation. So that's my takeaway, and I'm certainly going to do my piece to try to encourage that in private practice with the leverage we have as a client.
Yes, you go, girl. Make sure you're pushing that envelope. And Naomi, when you hear from Angela and she's pushing the envelope,
Yeah.
what will you reflect on today as the most impactful comment?
Absolutely. I think though, package what Laura and Angela just said, there might be takeaways, but I think it goes back to that productivity conversation we had at the very start, and that's what this all feeds into, in terms of how we are, we can be more effective, efficient, using data, listening to our clients and the expectations that they have, and we just have a lot of still work to do, but I think it's there's just a lot to, I think, for us all to reflect on and to move forward with. But I think it's exciting, and I do think that there's a lot we can do collectively in working together to kind of keep moving forward and really being productive and delivering that value back to our stakeholders.
Well, I do have a philosophy that many of you have probably heard me say before, and that is that a rising tide lifts all boats. Not my line, but certainly one that I think applies here. If we're all seeing some legal tech adoption, if we're all pushing for legal tech adoption across the entire ecosystem, whether it be in the court system with access to justice and getting some of those wait times down, whether it be using data in-house, or whether it be helping our clients to adopt systems that improve their legal tech know-how and what they can do on a daily basis to make themselves more productive, then the whole industry will get more productive as well. Thank you so much, ladies. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation. And now back to the Global Legal Tech Hub HQ. Thanks again, guys.